Welcome to Truth Behind History. Today we are diving into the Dyatlov Pass mystery. In the next few minutes, you'll hear how a tent ended up sliced from the inside, why trained mountaineers ran half-dressed into sub-zero darkness, how a few stray hints of radiation ignited decades of speculation, and how sealed archives shaped the story we think we know. Buckle up. Let's set the stage. Picture the Soviet Union in the late 1950s. On paper, it's a period sometimes called a thaw after the ice age of Stalin, but don't let the word fool you. The air is still cold with suspicion. The security services are powerful, the press is obedient, and the state prefers a world in which every event fits neatly into the official narrative. If a story complicates that narrative, it's not merely inconvenient, it's dangerous. Now zoom in on the Ural Mountains, that long granite spine separating Europe from Asia. The Urals are more than a rugged postcard. They are a strategic workshop of the Soviet system. Military factories hum there. Rail lines move metals, munitions, and machinery. Test sites and restricted zones are stitched across the map like invisible fencing. Even the geography cooperates with secrecy. Vast distances, brutal winters, and low population density turn the landscape into a natural curtain. If you were designing a place where important things could happen quietly, you'd draw the Urals. That strategic importance creates a simple incentive: guard the region's image the way you guard its facilities. The fewer questions asked, the fewer answers owed. And so, throughout this era, information moves like a rationed commodity. You don't just consume it, you're allotted it. Reports circulate upward, not outward. Journalists learn to write tidily. Scientists learn which findings are publishable and which are better shared with a filing cabinet. And what happens to anomalies, those messy, stubborn events that refuse to behave? They get managed. Sometimes that means reinterpreting them with a safer explanation. Sometimes it means silence. Think of it like smoothing a wrinkle in a flag. The goal isn't to understand the wrinkle, it's to make the flag look flat again. If a tragedy hints at embarrassment, at weakness, at something incompatible with the heroic story of progress, the state has every reason to minimize it, classify it, or redirect attention. Not necessarily because a grand conspiracy is afoot, but because the machine of centralized control runs best when the inputs are predictable. That's the context in which a group of skilled students heads into the mountains. It matters because context frames expectations. In an open system, anomalies invite investigation. In a closed system, anomalies invite management. So as we step into this story, keep the backdrop in mind: late 50s paranoia still lingering, the Urals carrying military weight, and a habit, almost a reflex, of tidying away uncomfortable facts. With that lens, what follows will feel less like random chaos and more like a collision between human tragedy and institutional incentives. Ready? Let's walk up the slope together, carefully. Let's meet our travelers before the mystery takes over. Igor Dyatlov's group is exactly the kind of team you want when the map turns white and the wind starts to sound like an engine. 9 university students, most of them engineering minds from the Ural Polytechnic Institute. Think about what that means in practice. These are people trained to test assumptions, to measure twice, to keep meticulous notes. If you've ever watched engineers pack for a trip, you know the vibe: lists, backups, and backups for the backups. The confidence here isn't bravado, it's competence. Their destination is not a postcard stroll. It's a winter expedition designed to stretch both body and mind. Why go? The purpose is clear and ambitious: earn a Grade 3 certification in ski mountaineering. In the Soviet system, this isn't a souvenir pin. It requires a multi-day route through severe conditions, navigation across exposed slopes and forest, disciplined teamwork, and the ability to set camp, manage risk, and move with purpose when the thermometer is less a number and more an insult. You don't apply for Grade 3 unless you already have miles in your legs, skills in your hands, and trust in your companions. Let's pause on that trust for a moment. In the mountains, trust is not a feeling, it's infrastructure. It's the chain that keeps every decision from fraying. The leader sets a pace, the navigator reads the land like a text, the stove operator guards the heat as if it were gold. When one person stumbles, the others shift their weight without debate. This group knew that rhythm. Their diaries and route plans, their carefully chosen equipment, and their training all point to a team that had earned the right to attempt something hard. Now, zoom out to the culture cheering them on. In the late Soviet Union, physical endurance isn't just a personal hobby. It is a civic virtue, a public signal that the system can shape strong, disciplined citizens. Universities sponsor clubs. Factories fund sports societies. Newspapers celebrate grueling feats the way a modern feed celebrates viral challenges. Success on the mountain translates, symbolically, into success for the state. That's part of the draw for students. 2. Achieve something worthy, represent your institute well, and come home with both a credential and a story. This is why the expedition carries a double meaning. On the surface, it's a demanding winter tour meant to certify skill. Beneath that, it's a page in a larger album of achievement, proof that disciplined youth can stare down the elements and make a plan hold. The group embraces both motives, personal mastery and public pride. If you want a mental image, picture 9 smart, tough young people at a train platform with skis, packs, route maps covered in penciled notes, and the kind of excited fatigue that comes right before an adventure begins. They are not tourists, they are practitioners. One last point about their preparation. Engineering students approach the backcountry with a particular mindset, systems thinking. The tent is a system, the stove is a system, the daily schedule is a system. When weather changes, they don't panic, they update parameters. When terrain complicates, they iterate. This mindset doesn't make you invincible, but it helps you avoid the obvious mistakes. It also means that when things go wrong, observers later will look for a cause outside the ordinary, because ordinary errors are exactly what these teams are trained to avoid. So as the group heads away from city lights and toward the ridgelines of the Urals, remember who they are and why they're there. A capable, organized team pursuing a respected certification, embodying a culture that prizes endurance and discipline. Their story begins not with fear, but with purpose. And purpose is what makes the following questions echo. Night on the slope, a canvas tent glowing faintly from a stove, wind pressing the fabric like a hand. Then something happens that unthreads the routine. When rescuers later find the tent, it is standing but ruined by cuts. The fabric is slashed from the inside. Think about that choice. In a blizzard you guard heat like a treasure. You open a tent carefully. You do not destroy your shelter unless the inside feels more dangerous than the outside. Those knife strokes are not decoration, they are a decision. Now picture what comes next. There are footprints leading away from the tent, not a panicked stampede in every direction. A line. Some prints show socks only, some are barefoot, a few look like felt boots. The temperature is brutal, the group is trained. Leaving without proper clothing is a recipe for hypothermia. Yet they leave. That detail carries weight because it conflicts with everything we said about competence. You only break procedure when you believe procedure will cost you more. The search teams begin to find bodies. Not all together, not all at once. The discoveries are staggered over the landscape and over time. 2 are found first, near the edge of the forest, beside the remains of a small fire. They are lightly dressed. Others are discovered on the slope between the trees and the tent, as if they tried to return and did not make it back. Much later, more are found in a ravine, deeper into the woods, where snow has hidden them. This pattern matters. It suggests movement with intention. Seek the trees for shelter. Try to warm up. Attempt to return. Then, for reasons we will wrestle with, fail. The injuries are not uniform. Some victims show signs you expect from exposure. Others show trauma that is harder to square with a simple flight into the cold. There are fractured skulls. There are broken ribs. Not small injuries. Serious ones. On at least one body, the damage appears severe without obvious external wounds. The kind of blunt force you might compare to a fall. In 2 cases, the eyes are missing. That detail is disturbing, but it can have natural explanations in a cold environment with scavengers and meltwater. Still, when read alongside the trauma, it adds to the impression that this was not a straightforward night. Then there is the detail that launched 1,000 arguments. Tests detect traces of radiation on some clothing, not a glowing green comic book scene. Traces enough to be noted and entered into the record. Enough to raise questions that do not go away. Where did it come from? Was it from the environment? From materials the students carried? From something else? Radiation becomes a word that sticks to the case like static. Pull these threads together and you feel the tension. A tent cut open from within. A disciplined team walking into killing cold without proper gear. Bodies discovered in stages. Some near a fire under the trees. Some on the slope as if climbing back. Others in a ravine. Injuries that range from expected to severe. Oddities like missing eyes and unusual test results on clothing. Each element by itself can be argued with. All of them together create a picture that is hard to frame. As a historian, this is the moment you slow down. You resist the urge to fill the silence with an answer that is too easy. Instead, you let the physical facts speak. Decisions leave signatures. The signature here says urgency. It says something in or around that tent demanded immediate exit. It says the group tried to solve the problem step by step and lost to the cold and to forces they could not fully manage in the dark. Hold that image, not the myth. The sequence. A cat tent. A march to the trees. Attempts to live. Efforts to return. Injuries that complicate the story. The night of February 1st is not just a scene of fear. It is a series of choices under pressure, recorded in snow. When facts feel jagged, theories multiply. Let's walk through the 3 big families of explanation, not as rival fan clubs, but as tools on a bench. Each one fixes some problems and breaks others. First, the natural world. Start with avalanche. On cold slopes, snow can behave like a loaded bookshelf, quiet, poised, and then, one nudge, everything slides. The avalanche idea explains the urgent exit. If you think a slab is about to release, you don't hunt for your boots and parka, you get out. It can also explain why the tent was cut from the inside. In danger, the fastest door is a knife. But avalanches leave signatures, debris fans, broken poles, burial layers. Some rescuers reported little of that, which makes skeptics raise an eyebrow. Supporters reply that a small, dense slab could move, nudge the tent, scare the team, and then harden again, leaving a subtle footprint. Reasonable people can disagree here because winter is a tricky archivist. It preserves and erases at the same time. Then there are katabatic winds, cold air rushing downhill like a freight train at night. These winds can roar suddenly, collapse a tent, or fill it with spindrift, turning the inside into a choking snow globe. Imagine waking, coughing, the stove sputtering, poles flexing, fabric slapping your face. You might cut your way out simply to breathe and regroup lower on the slope. This model accounts for urgency without invoking exotic forces, though it has to wrestle with the injuries later found and with why an experienced group couldn't stabilize the situation in place. Tucked under the natural umbrella is a grim physiological phenomenon called paradoxical undressing. In severe hypothermia, the body can misread signals, producing a sensation of burning heat. Victims sometimes remove clothing even as they freeze. It sounds absurd until you've seen case reports. This could explain why some were lightly dressed. It does not, by itself, account for major trauma, but it reminds us that human biology can become an unreliable narrator when the temperature plummets. Second family, man-made factors. Here the story meets the shadows of the Cold War. One proposal is that the area overlapped with secret testing, parachute mines, illumination flares, or other ordnance that could shock, disorient, or injure at a distance. A concussive blast could fracture ribs without obvious external wounds, and the strange light some people reported in the wider region feed this idea. The challenge is documentation. Restricted zones and incomplete records make it hard to prove a timeline that lines up neatly with the hiker's final night. Another man-made hypothesis is a clandestine encounter, say, an accidental run-in with people who did not want to be seen. This could explain fear, flight, and a quick attempt to hide in the trees, though it relies on actors who leave almost no trace. Covert operations flourish in rumor-rich environments because they are, by definition, difficult to confirm. Third family, speculative and supernatural. This basket collects everything from UFOs to cryptids like the Yeti. It thrives for two reasons. 1. The facts are genuinely strange. 2. Secrecy creates empty spaces where imagination does its best work. Could unknown lights or phenomena terrify a group? Possibly. But when we evaluate these ideas, we have to ask a boring but necessary question: what evidence would look different if the cause were ordinary? Most of the physical record, footprints, heat loss, slope, frostbite, still behaves like Earth. The extraordinary claims sit mostly in the interpretive layer, where mystery loves to live. Here's the sober way to think about all this. Natural models are good at explaining the exit and the environment's slow victory over the human body. They struggle with some of the more severe injuries. Man-made models are good at explaining trauma or panic. They struggle to show clear, verifiable presence in the exact time and place. Speculative models are good at capturing our sense of wonder and dread. They struggle with testable predictions. In other words, each tool tightens one screw and loosens another. Why walk through these options so carefully? Because theories aren't just answers, they're maps of what we value as evidence. Some people prize mechanical plausibility. Others weigh political context more heavily. Others chase the edge of the known. If we keep all three families on the bench, we avoid falling in love with a single story too soon, and we stay honest about what the record can and cannot carry. History often speaks as loudly through what is not said as through what is. The official investigation into this tragedy ends with a phrase that has haunted the case ever since: an unknown compelling force. That wording does two things at once. It acknowledges that something powerful occurred, and it refuses to name it. It is like a doctor writing, cause of death, something. You can feel the fence being built around the facts. Why would an inquiry stop there? Consider the institutional habits of the era. Investigations in a centralized system are not merely about finding truth, they are also about protecting coherence. If the available explanations threaten to collide with protected programs, military priorities, or the heroic image of national competence, the safest conclusion is sometimes a foggy one. Unknown compelling force is a conclusion that closes a file while keeping doors locked. Then there is the matter of classification. Case materials are not released to the public. Files live in cabinets that ordinary citizens will never open. That, too, is a choice with consequences. In any open society, uncertainty invites outside scrutiny. In a closed one, uncertainty breeds rumor because there is no space for third-party verification. When documents are sealed, the public does not stop asking questions, it simply moves to the only available courtroom, the imagination. Now think about incentives. If you were an official responsible for both safety and reputation, what outcome would you prefer? A tidy narrative with limited fallout, a finding that does not require admitting to a dangerous test, a procedural failure, or a weakness in training. Even if no deliberate cover-up exists, the gravitational pull toward minimal embarrassment is strong. This is not a grand conspiracy theory, it is a basic feature of bureaucracies guarding their own stability. Notice how the language of the report shapes everything downstream. Unknown compelling force sounds authoritative and mysterious at the same time. It discourages further questions because it implies that the unknown is both real and beyond reach. It also invites them, because humans hate blank labels. The phrase becomes a mirror where each reader can see the threat they find most plausible: avalanche, blast, panic, encounter. With the record shut and the phrasing vague, the debate is exported to living rooms and campfires. For the families and friends, the opacity adds a second wound. Grief wants clarity. It wants to understand the final hours so it can build a story that honors the lost. Instead, they are given a formula that explains little. Over time, that gap creates a low, steady hum of mistrust. Not necessarily rage, not even open dissent, but the sense that truth has been managed rather than discovered. In a system that prizes narrative control, people learn to read between lines, to decode silences, to treat absence of evidence as evidence of something withheld. The net effect of the Soviet response is paradoxical. It closes the case on paper while opening it in the public mind. It protects short-term order while fertilizing long-term doubt. And it ensures that, far from disappearing into the archives, the incident will migrate into a different kind of archive, the collective memory, where questions do not expire. Time has a way of turning unsolved cases into mirrors. Decades pass, the snow melts and returns, and yet this story keeps reflecting our own questions back at us. The first consequence is endurance, not just the endurance of the hikers on that final night, but the endurance of public curiosity. Year after year, people return to this ridge in their minds because the facts remain sharp enough to unsettle and incomplete enough to invite us in. That combination is catnip for historians, investigators, and ordinary readers who sense that the past still has something to say. Now consider what happens when an official narrative leaves a blank space. The case never quite leaves the stage. Instead, it migrates from courtrooms and archives to documentaries, articles, and late-night debates. Each new generation rediscovers the file, adds its own questions, and tests the old answers. That, in itself, is a legacy. The event becomes a civic exercise in critical thinking. People learn to weigh physical evidence, to separate what was witnessed from what was inferred, and to notice how language can both reveal and conceal. Reopened looks in later decades matter for another reason. They signal that institutions, too, feel the gravity of unfinished stories. When authorities return to a case long after the headlines fade, they are acknowledging that clarity is a public good. Even if conclusions remain cautious, the very act of revisiting sends a message: truth is not a one-time product, it is a process. And processes can improve when new tools, new methods, and a willingness to revisit assumptions are brought to bear. There is also a quieter legacy written closer to the ground. Families, classmates, and communities build memory with rituals and markers, with retellings that keep names alive. In that sense, consequence is not just about theories and reports, it is about dignity. The more we learn to read the record carefully, the more human the story becomes. We stop treating the hikers as characters in a puzzle and see them as people who made difficult choices under punishing conditions. Finally, the case leaves an institutional lesson that reaches beyond one mountain and one night. In systems where information is scarce, uncertainty grows like frost. Scarcity breeds speculation, speculation breeds mistrust, and mistrust can linger longer than any storm. Transparency, by contrast, is like opening a window in a stuffy room. It does not guarantee comfort, but it allows the air to circulate. The legacy here is the reminder that accuracy and openness are not luxuries, they are safety features. When events go wrong in dangerous places, the path to real learning is paved with records, candor, and the humility to say what we know, what we don't, and what we still need to test. In short, the consequences are layered. A story that refuses to die. A public that learns to interrogate evidence. Institutions that feel the pull to revisit and clarify. Families who keep memory honest. And a standing invitation to practice transparency before the next storm arrives. Step back with me for a moment. It's easy to let this story harden into a puzzle box with a single, satisfying answer hidden inside. But what we've really seen is a human night lived under brutal pressure, and a system that turned those hours into decades of questions. So here are the reflections I want us to carry out of the mountains. First, about evidence and stories. Snow keeps receipts, but they're smudged. The tent cut from the inside, the line of footprints, the staggered recoveries, the mix of injuries, the stray traces on clothing. Each fact narrows possibilities, none of them clinches the case alone. That should teach us a discipline we don't often practice online, letting the record set the size of our conclusions. Not smaller, not larger. Big claims should lift heavy weights. If they can't, they go back on the shelf. Second, about incentives and information. Systems with tight control prefer tidy narratives because tidy narratives are easier to manage. But when the supply of verified facts runs low, demand doesn't disappear, it just goes to another market. Rumor steps in, speculation raises its hand, and mistrust compounds quietly, like interest. If we want better outcomes after disasters, we need better habits before them. Preserve records, open what can be opened, explain what cannot be, and show the work. Transparency isn't a luxury, it's the safety rail that keeps us from tumbling into folklore. Third, about the people at the center. Competent young mountaineers made quick decisions in the dark, under punishing cold, with incomplete information. That is not a story about superstition. It is a story about risk, perception, and how even skilled teams can be cornered by nature in minutes. The sequence we traced is not melodrama. It is a sober respect for what the mountains can do and what humans will try when the thermometer tries to kill them. Now the questions that remain worth asking. If the original investigation had been documented with exhaustive clarity, would we still be arguing, or would we be learning from a closed case? What else in our world runs on the same fuel of secrecy and managed narratives, and what does it cost us when we accept that as normal? If the goal is genuine safety and not just the appearance of order, how do we design institutions that reward candor, protect whistleblowers, and treat uncertainty as a reason to dig deeper rather than close the file? And a final thought to take with you. Some mysteries resist complete answers. That doesn't make them spooky. It makes them instructive. They teach us how to reason with incomplete data, how to weigh human testimony against physical traces, and how to read the fingerprints of power on the stories we inherit. The hikers deserve that level of seriousness. So do we. If you found value in this, do me a favor. Like the video, drop a thoughtful comment with the theory you think lifts the most weight, and subscribe so you don't miss the next deep dive. And if you want more stories like this, check out my book History They Tried to Erase in the description. It pairs forgotten events with the questions they still force us to ask. Thanks for watching. And if thoughtful, entertaining history is your thing, there's plenty more waiting for you on this channel.